Welcome to Fintech Uncut, the quiz show with candid commentary on the biggest fintech and financial services news of the week that was. Disclaimer: this show is created purely for entertainment purposes and contains segments of sarcasm, satire, parody, and humor. Even if you don't think any of it is funny, the creators do not accept any responsibility or liability for the accuracy of any content shared and reminded you to always fact-check everything yourself. And now, it's over to your quizmaster.
Welcome everyone at Fintech Uncut, the quiz show with candid commentary on the week's biggest fintech and financial services stories with the wise guy, the other guy, and Judge Mary. My name is Ruud Koekelbergs, the host of the day, hesitant to see who will win this week's quiz. Chris, the wise guy Skinner, or Andrew, the other guy Forster. Let's start with the first question. This week, I learned that banks not just set maximum amounts for some transactions, but also minimum limits on certain transactions. How did I learn about that?
I'm going to be first off the mark here. Rick, you disappoint me because being Belgium, you should have known this already. Just like in most places in the world, there is a minimum transaction limit on like credit card spend and then you get charged a fee. In Belgium, there's a minimum amount that you can spend when you buy beer. You can't just buy one bottle of beer, you have to buy it by the case, and you should have known this already. That must be how you found that out.
I never tried buying one bottle of beer.
Exactly, yeah, you're Belgium, you wouldn't do that. I mean, it's a country law, isn't it?
I think Rick being very well networked in the Benelux markets, it's probably that you were trying to make a contactless payment in the dodgy part of Amsterdam, and it wasn't enough for the actual recipient to accept your fee.
Probably closer to it. I think that
you did get some applause for it. It's called the clap.
We'll have to ask Rick whether or not that one can be fact-checked afterwards.
Well, I'll be in Amsterdam next week, but I wasn't there this week.
But I reckon that this has got to do with the new fraud detection systems that all the banks are putting in. They're using AI to detect fraudulent transactions. So when you try to pay your electricity bill, the bank went, nah, you're not paying enough for electricity. We all know energy prices have gone up, so they rejected the transaction because it has to be over a certain amount for it to be an electricity bill payment, a valid one at least. No?
Wasn't this when you were trying to move some dodgy coins to Bitcoins or something? You know, you've got to have a certain amount of dodgy coins that are actually respected and acceptable enough, and you missed it by 0.01.
Isn't that getting closer, Mary?
I was like, Chris is leading us to some answer, maybe.
At least in terms of answering the question.
Yeah,
Is that
yeah.
like by the wheelbarrow of dodgy coins? You know, like they used to have in Zimbabwe back in the day, wheelbarrows of cash. Do you need wheelbarrows of dodgy coins for things?
All right. What's the real answer?
Right, this is the signature bank thing, I think, which is that basically they've put a block on blockchain deposits and crypto assets to say you can only move a certain amount in and out because it's getting regulatory oversight related to some of the things that happen with Binance and other exchanges. Does that sound about right?
Sounds very right.
And is that because Rick fell below the minimum threshold? You try to move less than 100,000 US dollars, Rick? I mean, that must have
I just read the article, but reading deeper in the article, so going beyond the title, I was a bit surprised, annoyed as well, because apparently most of the consumers using US dollar for their crypto on Binance don't use the Binance platform, but they use the Binance US platform. So the majority of US users were not even impacted despite the flashy title of the article.
And I think it's confusing at the moment because there's so many crypto platforms, exchanges that are limiting, particularly withdrawals due to liquidity. And at the same time, you know, the price of Bitcoin is going up, down, up. You know, it's very difficult to keep track of which exchange and which platform is actually viable and worth using. I mean, Mary, I don't know whether you've picked up on this, but there's so many options these days, too many currencies out there. I mean, the last count I had, over 1,000 different cryptocurrencies that were active over almost or just under 2,000 that have been launched. It's ridiculous.
It is ridiculous. I have nothing to add other than it is absolutely absurd. So with that, the points are Chris leading this round for having the right answer first, 7 points. Andrew, 5, liking the banter. We'll see where we go from here.
I think the next question is one for Andrew, our UK citizen. And the question, no, you're a Polish citizen.
Yeah, I'm a European. Sorry, I forgot.
You're a European, yes. Talking about that, next question. Is the UK anticipating a new exit? What are their plans by end of decade?
You didn't need to buzz. You already said it's for you.
Well, hasten to add, I might be a British citizen, but that doesn't make me British. Don't confuse me with that. But having said that, they're on the path at the moment of exiting the global economy. The way that our economy is tanking right now and them pushing up interest rates and absolutely messing up everything over here I reckon that they're just going to withdraw from the global economy and just be an island by themselves. What do you reckon, Chris?
Well, I mean, just building on that, Britain actually set a self-destruction button in 2016 when they voted to Brexit. And but the whole island will untether itself from the world and float into space in 2030. And the only way to save it is to get Tom Cruise doing a Mission Impossible to keep it on the ground.
Actually, I reckon that you're onto something there, because I would have said that they've already left the EU. Now they're just going to leave the planet thanks to our non-sponsor Elon Musk and SpaceX. See, I had to get Elon in there, didn't I?
I don't know. Every episode, you've got to mention Elon Musk.
Well, until somebody sponsors us to stop mentioning him, if somebody sponsors us, I'll stop saying Elon Musk every episode.
I actually think the UK is going to do a partnership with France and call themselves FUK.
Extra point for that.
I'll have to concede to Chris on that one there. I mean, it is better than I reckon the real story, which is that they're exiting probably cash, it seems, with the new Britcoin. But interestingly enough, when I had a look on the website, not the news article, but on the website from the Bank of England, their banner says the CBDC will not be replacing cash. So it's a bit interesting. Yeah, so why do we all need it then? It goes back to that age-old question. But is that the kind of exit that we're looking at? An exit of cash? Have
you read this week's blog of the banking scene, Andrew?
I was there on this week's banking scene.
You should know.
I know all of the arguments to pros and cons and the why and the why nots, but I'm still standing mystified as to why we actually need one. But anyway,
Mary,
the whole thing with Bitcoin and CBDCs is around, why do we need them? And the answer is that what's the difference between having a digital wallet from your bank and with digital money and digital transfers when you can now have a central bank digital currency as part of that, which actually wipes out a lot of the clearing and settlement infrastructure? That's the key motivation. But what intrigued me about this announcement is they're going to limit the amount of each transaction within Bitcoin. Why are you shaking your head, Rick?
Well,
because in my opinion, the main reason for having CBDC is purely politics.
Well, that's
global politics and international trade. There's not that much to do, in my opinion, with user experience, with helping the consumer, etc. It's making sure that there remains a pressure on more innovation, making sure that dominant international players don't take over the European payments landscape, etc., and making sure that central banks can keep playing a role in the payments field.
And that's also one of the big questions, which is if CBDCs were issued directly to consumers and citizens, then there's a question of oversight and control of government around your activities, which is the reason why it has to go through an intermediary financial partner. to give them to you, so it cannot be controlled and overseen by government.
Yep.
But then also, we've had this debate multiple times on different shows talking about if there is a retail CBDC issued directly to the public, who's going to be doing the KYC and AML and all of that? The central banks aren't geared up to do that. They would still have to outsource all of that to somebody else. Who would they outsource that? Well, the banks,
No, the Russians. No, they give it to the Russians.
But that's not different with today, Andrew. Central bank money is cash. Cash comes from the banks, so the KYC is done by the banks.
Exactly that. So saying that it's going to remove a whole lot of infrastructure, no, not really. I still don't see, very much difference between a CBDC and using what our money has been digital for decades already. It's just entries in a ledger somewhere. And people just move digits about. They don't move piles of gold and cash coins about. So CBDC is just a government form of the digital cash that we've already got digital representation of the numbers. Yeah.
Mary, what's going on here?
Well, my dog
is this becoming a serious show?
So that's one thing. Yeah. Yeah. Well, I have another question on this topic. That story said it would happen by the end of the decade, but that wouldn't be likely, would it? Is that a realistic deadline?
Again, we've asked quite a few people the question, and nobody comes up with a solid answer. That's probably the most solid prediction that I've seen for a long time.
It's just proof of concept. Having something in the market that should be feasible already exists in other countries.
Yeah,
I'll put it a different way, which is the UK government in 2012 said that they would abolish the use of checks in Britain by 2018. We still use checks.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. I feel like this is a longer storyline. All right, points. Andrew 6. Chris 6 plus his extra point for being funny, so 7.
Woohoo! All right, next question. There is a song Down Under with a warning about Australia. And please give me some credit here. Part of the lyrics go, I came from a land down under, where beer does flow and mention there. Can't you hear the thunder? You better run, you better take cover, yeah. Some people must have forgotten about that song and are now sitting on the blisters. What happened?
I'm trying to buzz in early here to relieve the pain, Rick. So
I want to keep it going. Karaoke, Fintech Uncut.
Fintech karaoke. Now there's an idea. Been there, done that.
Yeah.
What is Chanda? You said men Chanda.
He was just
said
the lyric.
Men Chanda. Yeah.
Does anyone know what that is?
Oh no, I don't.
You know what it is? Vomit.
Not going there, but basically, I think there's a strange fact here, which I heard this week in the news, which is that a few years ago, the Australian police actually launched a cash prize where if they stopped you when you were driving and you were sober, they gave you $500 to say thank you for driving not drunk.
If that's a true story, it needs to go in the show notes because that's great.
It's a true story. It's actually from 2016, but it did surprise me.
You still got to send me the link for that one because that's nuts.
That's much better than going on a strike to make a point to the government.
It's find sober Australian drivers and drunk ones, and I think it was 100 to 1 for the drunk ones or something.
I think that what a lot of people won't know, they might know the line, but they don't know the connection. The line, one of the other lines from the song, Rick, goes, buying bread from a man in Brussels, he was 6'4" and full of muscles. Now, lots of people won't know that Rick is 6'4" and full of muscles because I only ever see him on screen. But
Andrew, how does the song go? Can you sing it, please?
Buying bread from a man in Brussels.
No, now you're telling it. Can you sing it, please?
No, I can't sing it. I couldn't compete with you there, Rick.
And his little dance.
That would not be. Yeah. I think we need to set up Bob McLean for another Fintech playlist entry if we make it this week.
Well, going back to fintech karaoke, alter the words a bit. Do you come from a land of payments? Can I make my money now with your laments, whatever?
All right. All right. Give us some real information, maybe. Andrew, Chris, who's going to win this round?
Well, I'll start by saying that I think it's to do with the fact that Australia is trying to get back to the same sort of level of most economies like UK or wherever with fintech, and has created open banking rules, but the way they're being implemented are being abused. And there's a particular bank called ING, ING, sorry, that is implementing the open banking rules in a way that will inhibit the access for fintechs to their systems, and so there's been an outcry about it.
But, Chris, having a closer look at that, I don't know whether or not that's an actual correct interpretation. All that they said, and I know it's the sensational interpretation that's gone in the media, and I know there's been a massive outcry and all the rest. But all that they said was the current consents will be invalidated and new consents will have to be given. Now, can you please name me a single UK or European open banking project where the customers and the suppliers had not had to reconsent? Yes, the way that ING have done it, they didn't give sufficient notice, and they've really messed up their partners, and their partners are going to have to scrabble to do a whole lot of work to re-authenticate feeds and a whole lot. But that's part of the process. And I know that when banks that I've dealt with have adopted open banking, I've had to reconsent everything. They haven't just ported my consent over, because I think that would probably be a breach of GDPR and 101 other rules. So there's a one-sided narrative being put forward here, whereas actually the reality is, yeah, there's stuff that's going to happen anyway, and it would happen anyway, but people have latched onto this one specific aspect. Am I completely wrong here?
Well, just before we go there, I mean, it reminds me of when the UK did open banking implementation, and the fintech community were having an outcry, wrote to the government shortly after that was put forward and implemented, because most of the banks implemented their APIs in a different structure, and every single bank you had to have a different interface and integration with. And for fintechs, that's a huge amount of over effort and overwork. So there should have been a standard, and that's where maybe the regulators had their problems, because they didn't have a standard. But at the same time, for a bank, exactly as you said, Andrew, if you do this and don't reconsent people, then you can run into the troubles that Monzo and 26 and others have had, which is where they create full banking services after having a basic card license or e-money license, and didn't re-contract the customer, and therefore didn't have the right KYC. So it's a difficult balance.
What is, so like in the US, all I do is I'm like, a lot of screen scraping still taking place. So I'm just like, here you go. Here's my username and password. Every app that I use.
Take whatever you like.
Yes. I'm like, hello, here's my information. So when you provide consent, what does that look like from the experience? I know I'm sure it varies, but is it just check box?
It's very explicit. Yeah, it's tick boxes or radio buttons or something like that. It is explicitly logged consent for the use of certain data in certain ways.
Although most of the time consumers think about it as much as they would doing screen scraping.
Correct, yeah. But it's there as a, it's one of those CMA things, cover my ass.
Yeah. All right. All right. So Andrew, you lead this round with 8 points. Chris, 6. Uh-oh.
And I have more news from the UK, my friends. As someone explained, the PSR asked a fox to guard the henhouse, in the words of Treasury Committee Chair Harriet Baldwin. What did she mean by that?
Is this it's the new appointment of Boris Johnson as Entertainment Minister? I mean, the whole of Britain would have a fantastic party. Or maybe he's going to lead the King Charles coronation celebrations. I'm sure they could do that really well.
I've actually been at a conference recently where I overheard some mature ladies describing the esteemed Chris Skinner as being a bit of a silver fox. So I think maybe Chris has got a new job that he hasn't told us about yet, and Chris has got something really important to tell us all. Chris, silver fox?
Well, I've actually been appointed chair of the PSR. It's not the Payment Systems Regulator, it's the PSR. Sorry, PSR for short. Taking the PSR.
It's not going anywhere, Mary.
No, it's not going anywhere.
Maybe she was referring to the bosses of the 4 biggest banks in the UK for being greedy and not passing on the interest rate increases from Bank of England, not passing those on through to customers on their savings accounts. I mean, that made the news because the bosses are just being greedy. Well, they're the foxes in the hen house there, because you give them more interest and they're going to be reaping that as profits. Why should they pass the rewards on to the customers, for crying out loud? Yeah.
I think we're
Chris,
getting
are you
closer.
ready to challenge him? Yes.
Yeah, I think we're getting closer. I mean, basically, the Payment Systems Regulator, PSR, is not taking the piss, honestly. But it's meant to handle all the fraud exposures in all payments in Britain. And they've given the oversight of that to Pay UK, which happens to be a friend of all the banks and the financial services industry. And so, you know, it's putting the fox in charge of the hen house.
Bingo. You are the winner of this round. I don't know, Rick, did you want to add anything to Chris's answer? I mean,
Not really.
no. Just
No, I'm just the
conflict
host.
of
I'm
interest.
just giving questions.
All right.
And I have
Chris-
more questions.
All right. Well, I got points first, Rick.
course.
Chris, let's say I'm gonna give you 6 for this one. Andrew, I'm gonna give you a 4.
Did you know, Mary? Last
What?
week I got 30 points.
I did
I
see
was about
that.
to say,
And I thought, "Ooh,
you have to give the quizmaster points this week as well now, after
Well-
Bastian last week.
he would for the song alone. He's the winner. He doesn't
And
even
for the introduction,
No, for the song
But-
alone, -5.
all right, next question. How desperate can bank customers become for cash?
Well, given the state that all the bank branches are disappearing and the ATMs are disappearing, some people have had to resort to paying people to go and get cash out of an ATM for them. I mean, there's a story about a pensioner who his bank branch is only a mile away from him, but he's 91 years old, so he has to take the bus to get there, and he has to wait 2 hours for the bus sometimes each way. So he spends 5 hours just to go and draw some cash out of a cash machine, and he likes his cash. So I think that he'll start making use of these professional queuers. There's quite a few of them around. They charge around £20 an hour, and they go and stand in a queue for you, or they might run errands.
And how does that work? You give them your code of the card?
Well, you go and get them to draw cash, and then you go, oh, that's not such a good idea, huh? Happens in South Africa, though, all the time. A lot of my friends pay people to stand in queues for them to do
But
lots
if they
of
need
things.
money from the cash machine, how do they pay them? Because they can't pay them, they've got no cash.
Yeah, but they've got to go to the cash machine first, and then they're at risk of running away with all your cash, of course.
I was going to say,
But
sorry,
yeah,
Gary.
people are desperate.
I'm desperate. I'm actually known as Desperate Dan. But apart from that, I reckon they're so desperate in some cases that they actually robbed the bank. And I don't know if you've seen this, but in Lebanon, people have been holding up the banks with guns at gunpoint and asking for their cash out. And it's not to rob the bank of the bank's money, but it's to get the money that the bank has that is in their account, which they can't withdraw. And that's because after the Beirut bomb, the huge explosion in the harbor there, it's a complete mess.
Pretty desperate, but that wasn't the right answer, was it, Mary?
It's getting close and close and closer. Any add-ons, Chris and/or Andrew?
Well,
Well-
I've seen it. Andrew?
I was going to say, I have seen that the queues in Nigeria are so long that there was a video that went viral of people cooking and eating their noodles while they're actually standing in the queue just to wait to get their money out. I mean, the cash situation in Nigeria is quite bad at the moment. The Nigerian government has changed over to new notes and there aren't enough available. So is it related to somewhere around over there?
And how desperate were they?
How desperate were they? They were desperate enough to stand there while they, and there's another story also from Nigeria about them missing students, missing lectures and going starving at school and things like that, just because they need to stand in the queues for the ATMs and things.
Yeah, but you're missing the biggest news, which was that Nigerians are so desperate that they're going to the bank branch, take their clothes off and stand there naked until they could get their money out of the bank.
And then a massive fight ensued as well, of naked people in the bank. I still don't get why they were going naked, by the way. I did see that story.
Well, it's mainly men. It was called a stand-up protest.
But you're right, they didn't explain it in the article. They just said they were naked.
Yeah, I couldn't understand that at all. You know, that's
not a move you do, Andrew.
No, it's not something I ever thought that would work. You know, turning up to my local bank branch naked.
Well, the problem is if you or I, Andrew, went to our local bank branch and were in a protest, we wanted our money, took all our clothes off, it's a guaranteed way to clear the branch. So, you know, they then give you the money to get you to put your clothes back on so they can serve other customers who've left.
Yeah, probably pay us more actually just to do that.
If you'd like more about that, please visit Chris Skinner's OnlyFans page.
But you know, another question that I had around this story, right, about the naked people in the branches. I mean, we all know the children's story about the emperor's new clothes. So do we know for sure that those people were actually naked? Are they not just all the Nigerian princes that I keep on getting these emails from? And we just couldn't see the clothes, you know, they actually had the clothes on, you know, because they're princes, they like, you know, the emperors.
Well, the article had pictures.
Oh, no.
All right, Mary, what are the points?
All right, this is a wild story. It's actually quite sad. Okay, Chris, 7 points. Andrew, 5 points. Chris is in the lead, but Andrew could still score a lot.
How many for Rick? How many points for Rick? Maybe another. I'll give you 3, Rick, just for still being there smiling.
Thanks a lot, Chris. I'm gonna do my best in the next question to pronounce the names as they should be pronounced. I can't promise anything. Ashby McGowan from Glasgow and Tenaporn Sonkyu received £150 for the distress and inconvenience they had been caused by a major UK bank. What happened?
Isn't this that they tried to open a bank account, but they were refused because her name's got porn in it?
Oh, good catch. I hadn't even noticed that. Yeah.
I find often when you deal with some of the Asian names that they have porn or some other things, you know, Wang Chai Fok or whatever, and you just go, nah, it's lost in translation.
Yeah, that's definitely going to get caught by something there. Yeah. I think that a lot of us are due compensation from our banks when we try their ridiculous customer service lines and we get kept on hold for so long. So, you know, I phoned up a financial institution just recently and was on hold for 45 minutes while they kept on playing this message saying, we're terribly sorry, but due to COVID, we're having staff issues at the moment. Sorry, COVID, it was COVID-19, wasn't it? It's now 2023, but banks are still using COVID as an excuse. So I reckon that he probably waited in the queue for 96 hours and they paid him some compensation for that, you know.
Probably forgot to change the message, like the out of office that you forget to change.
You might.
It's also interesting. It's Ashby McGowan from Glasgow.
Ashby McGowan.
In case you wanted the correct pronunciation. But what's interesting about this is I'll ask you guys a question and see if any of the 3 of you can answer it, which is, do you know that Scottish banknotes are not legal tender.
Probably.
I didn't know they weren't legal tender. Are you talking about not legal tender in the UK or not legal tender even in Scotland?
They're not legal tender in Scotland.
Oh wow, that
How
is
does that
definitely
happen?
And
Well,
are
you
they
see,
used?
all the time. Yeah.
Ah,
Well, you see, I think that he tried to open an account with Scottish banknotes, and they said not legal tender. We refused to open the account. But actually, they should have opened the account because it's not legal tender because tender means it's backed by debt. It's a legal currency.
ah.
Oh,
So
interesting. Interesting
it's
educational point there.
yeah, which you know,
Mhm.
I discovered this recently and thought to myself, it's such an interesting line between what is a currency and what is tender. And tender's backed by,
Surprised Dave Birch hasn't written about that just yet.
yeah, I'm surprised he hasn't, but then he can only spread himself so thin.
Yeah.
Especially at his age.
He's too busy talking to us about yapstones.
Oh,
No,
let's go.
I thought that the reason why they paid him money for distress and inconvenience is that maybe they had just implemented their customer service chatbot based on Google's Bard. And Google's Bard is allegedly so human-like and realistic in its responses that he probably spent a couple of hours chatting it up and was very disappointed and distressed when he found out that it wasn't actually a lass on the other side. It was a chatbot, and that sent him into, depression, and they had to pay him money to compensate for that.
It wasn't amazing when they launched Bard to keep up with Microsoft's Chat GPT that it got a question wrong during the first demo and they lost billions on their share price. I mean, how
was
bad?
hilarious.
Yeah,
That feels relatable, honestly. Like a relatable storyline.
Well,
All right,
actually,
but no.
on Rick's banking scene after work, we had somebody talking about the Kate. Sorry, remind me, Rick, which institution does Kate come from?
KBC.
KBC. Their chatbot, their customer service chatbot, and Kate had been invited out on a date before because the customers genuinely didn't know that that it was a chatbot they were speaking to. So
Oh, I wonder
yeah,
No.
these things can get quite
what kind of
realistic.
date.
I think
Go-
that's built on the Google technology.
Yeah,
go watch the film Her with Joaquin Phoenix. One of
I
my
have
favorite
seen
films.
it. I have seen it.
All right,
Harry.
we're coming on time. Does anyone have information here that's credible?
No.
Well,
I thought so.
well, yeah. The Bank of Scotland had actually prevented Ashley from making a payment to his wife because they labelled her as a criminal. Just showing massive amount of bias and discrimination without any question. They are legally married in Thailand with a Buddhist wedding, and when he tried to send her some money, they labeled it as a fraudulent transaction and they bounced it back again and rejected the transaction. I mean, it's just in this day and age, and the pain that he had to go through to try and get them to acknowledge the fact that he was trying to legally send his wife and it wasn't a scam or anything like that. So yeah, I'd
It's
hate
not
to
that
see what
unusual.
happens when the AI gets hold of that.
Yeah, it's not that unusual. I mean, I actually went into a bank a few years ago with my wife, and we wanted to open a joint account for a specific reason for our children. And they said, "Oh, your wife doesn't exist." I said, "But she's sitting here. You can see her. She's here." And they said, "No, we don't recognize the identity document you bought with her because she had a expired passport, a driving license, but no residency proofs because I pay all the utility bills." And they said, "So she doesn't exist." And we had to go through quite a big process over a couple of months to try and get documentation they would accept, which I understand with KYC, going back to our earlier discussion, why the bank has to do that. But at the same time, in the 21st century, we're in 2023, these processes are so archaic and analog, it's ridiculous.
It's tough, even if you would do it with AI. I think in 99.9999% of the cases, it's correct. And the exceptions, they hit the news. And if they fail, or for example, if they start sending money to a potential terrorist or real porn organization, then it hits the news as well. So banks have to be careful, and every once in a while there's a bad luck, and it will cost them £150.
You sound like a
Luckily, it's not a
banker.
legal tender.
Rick, you sound like a banker.
I was gonna say, he sounds like a banker, so deduct all the points we gave him.
All right.
Eliminated. All right, scores. Chris,
Rick gets
6,
no.
Andrew, 8.
And who
But
scored
still,
highest for
Chris
this?
is the winner.
Andrew.
I actually think
No,
Rick.
he won that round. Andrew won that round.
I think Rick gets -10 for being like a banker.
-10, yeah. Well, -10, yeah.
I have a t-shirt of Fintech Uncut, my friends. Anyway, we are at the end of our show. Thank you all very much for your contributions and your valuable insights. Thank you for listening and watching. I cannot wait for more international fintech news coming soon. If you like our show, make sure you register on our website for the newsletter to be the first to know about a new episode, or follow us in your favorite podcast channel. Also, review that podcast if you like. That will help us build a bigger community of Fintech Uncut. If you are a real big fan, you can find the link to our merchandise on the same website, www.fintechuncut.com. Don't forget to subscribe, whatever channel you're on. This was the 11th episode of Fintech Uncut already. We hope to entertain you, your friends, your colleagues, your connections and followers, your cats and dogs very soon, probably next week again. Bye-bye.